Pranusha, though, is founding and senior security engineer at Lark Health. She's going to be talking about how you can level up your security maturity. So please welcome to the ATT&CKcon stage, Pranusha Samareddy.
Good morning, everyone. It's a beautiful day today. I'm very excited to talk about something I've been working on for a while, evaluating and enhancing security maturity. And the fun fact about it is how we can evaluate and enhance security maturity through MITRE ATT&CK mapping. Before we dig deep, I just want to say this is my first ever presentation at a real security conference. So go easy on me. And if I screw up, I blame my nerves. My name is Pranusha. I've been in security industry for almost 7 years now. I've been actively working on penetration testing, blue teaming, infrastructure security, product security. Learning something new about security every day has been a cool thing about my profession so far, which I totally love. I'm a senior security engineer at Lark Health. I was also their founding security engineer. It's been a fun ride so far. What's on the agenda today? We will be talking about how human error plays a significant role in security breaches. Then we will talk about techniques from MITRE ATT&CK framework that attackers use to target employees of an organization, and how we can map these techniques against the existing security controls and implement new security controls to fight back against attackers and adversaries. By the end of this presentation, I want all of us to realize that security awareness is an important key factor to improve security maturity of a company. Then we will talk about how to evaluate security awareness to improve security maturity, and then how we can enhance security awareness to improve security maturity. When I put the slide up, I wanted to show the magnitude of the effect that the security breaches have and how much secure customer data we lost throughout the period of time. In 2017, Equifax announced a data breach that exposed millions of data. And the reason that it happened from the case study that I've read is a web application firewall was not patched in time and it was exploited. In 2018, Panera Bread exposed millions of customer records because of misconfigured API and having customer data in plain text in their server-side environment. In 2019, Capital One had a data breach that exposed millions of customer information. And this happened because of several reasons, like overly permissive IAM policies on their S3 buckets, unencrypted data, weak encryption technologies, etc. In 2020, University of California fell victim for a phishing attack, and they lost SSN information, salaries of employees, and a lot of PII of the employees. In 2021, Colonial Pipeline fell victim for a ransomware attack. And in 2022, Robinhood disclosed a security breach that potentially leaked a lot of customer data. After doing all this research, I realized there is a common factor for these security breaches, and it is the human error. Implementing good security controls is not just enough for defending against these attackers and adversaries. It's necessary to recognize that human is still the weakest element in our cybersecurity defense. So what I realized working for all these years in my professional career is fighting against these attackers and adversaries is not just a responsibility of the security team, but it should be a collective collaborative effort of the entire organization. With that in mind, I wanted to say, and I wanted to show how I've been working in instilling security mentality, developing security mentality in my colleagues using MITRE ATT&CK framework. Mapping security controls. With keeping time in mind, I just focused on important tactics that matter to my organization here: initial access, execution, persistence, and collection and exfiltration. When I thought about these tactics, the first thing that came into my mind is, what are the security controls that I have in place already? Let's categorize them to the tactics that I have selected here. Initial access is what an attacker gets initially when they get foothold into an asset or an environment, right? So I need to have good multi-factor authentication. I need to have SSO-based logins to fight back any kind of weak compromised passwords. I need to have good phishing awareness trainings to train my employees. And I should have good continuous patch management system to avoid any kind of exploitation. Execution and persistence. In this phase, an attacker might execute malicious code and make sure that they have persistent access in an asset or an environment. So I need to have least privilege access to any kind of environment and asset that has PHI and PI, and I have to do quarterly access auditing. I should have role-based access, and then good continuous logging and monitoring to identify any kind of suspicious activity. Lastly, for collection and exfiltration, this is one of the goals of an attacker and adversary, right? Like when they get into a system or an environment, one of the goals that they may have is there any customer data here? How can I get access to this customer data, and how can I leak this customer data? And to fight back, what are the existing security controls I have? I have strong encryption techniques, and I have to make sure there is limited access to the databases of the storage system that has PHI PI. Unless until it's not absolutely necessary, no employee should have access to these environments. And lastly, I should have good policies and procedures that encourage employees to talk to security team whenever they find any kind of suspicious activity that could be a data breach or any kind of data leakage. Let's dig deep into these tactics we just discussed. Initial access. There are many techniques available from MITRE ATT&CK framework that relate to initial access tactic, right? But I chose phishing and valid accounts because these can focus solely on the employee to get initial access onto an environment. Phishing emails are very common. Attackers send phishing emails to gain access to the victim's local system. And valid accounts is what they do is they gain access to compromised credentials. They may also access inactive accounts, which should have been removed during offboarding process when an employee left. And gaining these valid accounts, they can evade security defenses we have in place and get initial access. And what are the mitigation techniques that MITRE provide for us for this? Good user training. Make sure that you have good phishing email campaigns that would educate employees and encourage employees to learn more about phishing to avoid any kind of phishing business email compromise happening. Make sure you have strong multi-factor authentication to avoid and reduce risk if credentials were compromised. And lastly, make sure you have strong password policies to have strong credentials and rotate credentials and rotate your keys. So even if a key is compromised, you can immediately rotate it. Execution and persistence. To execute malicious code, sometimes attackers still have to depend on an employee of an organization. And then if they get access to the admin credentials of the cloud or container administration environment, they can abuse the power. They can run malicious commands on cloud management services or Docker or Kubernetes API server. And lastly, to maintain persistence, they can manipulate the account on the access they have by adding the account to a higher privilege group or modifying authentication process to avoid any kind of defense mechanisms we have in place. And what are the mitigation techniques that MITRE ATT&CK framework provide for us? Again, user training. Have strong user training. Educate your users. Make sure you have good simulation campaigns in place that would encourage employees to learn and be curious about security. And have privileged account management. Make sure that you have quarterly auditing on the privileged accounts, meaning administration access on your cloud environment or any kind of assets that have critical information. Similarly, auditing the access on user account management. And lastly, have strong multi-factor authentication on all the assets that have critical information. And lastly, password policies that would encourage people to rotate their passwords and API keys that also will help you to have a strong BCDR, business continuity and disaster recovery plan. Lastly, collection and exfiltration. As we already discussed, this could be one of the goals of the attacker, right? When they gain access to a system, they would look for sensitive information, customer information, and how to gain access to this customer information and how to exfiltrate this data. Many times, once an attacker gets into the system, they would look into the information repositories like wiki pages, README pages on GitHub that would provide them some kind of information about where they could search for PHI PI or if there is actually PHI PI in the wiki pages. Then data from cloud storages like S3 buckets on the databases on the cloud environment. Always make sure that they have strong encryption techniques for this. And lastly, data from local system. This is my favorite. If you're working for a health company, right, employees have to download PHI on their system to manipulate the data and send it back to a different department or different employee. This is where you have to make sure they don't download it onto their local environment, because if there is a phishing attack and an email and the local system is compromised, they can gain access to PHI, which is not good. So you should have strong encrypt sensitive information. Then you have to do strong auditing, have multi-factor authentication, make sure you have data backup, and you have strong user training. Evaluate security awareness. How can I evaluate the security awareness of my company? Make sure you have security champions, have strong phishing email campaigns that would give emails, that would provide phishing emails that look as good as real emails, so employees can be educated. Make sure you have red team activity simulated to identify security loopholes in your company. Send security awareness questionnaires, review your code to find any kind of hard-coded credentials, and give good security feedback to your engineers and employees to make them understand that we are all working together to fight back against bad people, that we are not fighting against each other. Lastly, how can we enhance security maturity, security awareness? Have customized security trainings, because security trainings cannot be one fit all. They differ based on the jobs and responsibilities. Incident response tabletop exercises. As you have your security champions, add them to these incident response tabletop exercises so they know how to respond in a real incident. Instill security importance in managers, send security newsletters, and collaborate with other departments to guide them in a right way to do their job in a secured manner. Lastly, I just want to say that security maturity is not a one-time event. It's a continuous journey. Whenever you reach a point you think that you have good security maturity, you always have to think about leveling your game to fight back against these continuous attacks that are happening in this world, because we as security engineers have a lot of responsibilities in protecting customer data. So let's fight back against adversaries and attackers. With that, I would like to open the floor for any questions.
Excellent job. So I think we probably have time for one quick question, and I'm going to selfishly steal this one. So one of the interesting things about mitigations and even data source and detections, and you were implicitly doing this very, very well, but what are your thoughts on how you translate those like broad categories of multi-factor authentication or user training to an actual organization? I think you did an excellent job like contextualizing that for an organization. Is there any trick to make sure that's like customized and tailored, or how do you go about that?
Yeah, how I did specifically for my organization is, it's a health company, so we have a lot of PHI and PAI. So identifying the systems that contain this data is my first responsibility here. And once I figured out what are these assets, then I figured out what kind of security controls I have to have around them. It might not be just multi-factor authentication, right? There could be something else that I need to do for that asset. And keeping that in mind, I tailored the security controls around the assets.
Makes sense. Thank you so much. Small token of our appreciation.
Thank you.